Welcome to Serial Killer. Serial Killer is a new podcast recorded by I, Mariam Sheikh, Hannah Kim, and Dita Saravanan.
And before we dive into this podcast, I would like to mention that our title is actually not spelled Serial, but with Cereal.
This is because Sarah Koenig loves breakfast cereal so much, she decided to name her podcast Serial. Different spelling, but pronounced the same phonetically. Wow, great information, Dita. But we have to get right into our podcast. At this moment, we are going to dissect a case that around 20 years ago, police could not.
Yes, the infamous murder of Haymon Lee.
So, for those who have not caught up on Serial, Sarah Koenig explains that there is no way Adnan Syed is guilty of murdering Hae-Min Lee. But today we are here with evidence to prove her wrong. First of all, the weakest point in Adnan's story is the fact that he has no solid alibi. He cannot properly recall events that occurred that day. And as for why that's so unusual, you'll find out later in this episode.
And if you think this is not considered quote unquote weak, let me repeat what Miriam said. Adnan does not have an alibi. He doesn't have an alibi, and you can't just shake this off.
Also, Don states that after he was called by police about Hayes' disappearance, his first instinct was to recall the events that happened that day so that he could have a solid alibi, stated in Crime Junkie 2.
Yeah, but Adnan didn't do that. He got the same call from the police, but did not choose to remember and confirm his story. This ultimately destroys Adnan's image.
Exactly. And part of this could be related to the brain's trauma response. Adnan was under age 25, meaning his brain was still not fully developed. And as a teenager, blinking out when he killed Hay could be his brain's trauma response, since murdering someone is quite a traumatic event. Okay, yes, but you're probably wondering how this brain thing actually works. So, once a trauma invoking event happens, for example, a death of a loved one or domestic violence, some initial reactions, including exhaustion, confusion, anxiety, and more, can take place.
Also, there's a correlation with trauma and substance use as well. People who abuse substances are at an increased risk of developing PTSD or post traumatic stress disorder.
No way. It's stated countless times in Serial that Adnan had experience in smoking and using substances.
Yeah, and using substances while in a traumatic episode can eventually lead to forgetting the event, which is what happened with Anand. He failed to remember what he did most of January 13th, 1999.
And didn't Adnan smoke weed after supposedly killing Hay? Yes, and this is when we can hit the third piece of evidence. Jay and Adnan visit Kathy's house to smoke weed at around night. And keep in mind, this is after when Adnan and Jay bury Hay's body. So in episode 6, page 6, Kathy tells Koenig that Adnan received a phone call and he was saying things like, "What am I going to do? What am I going to say? They're going to come talk to me."
This was the call that claimed to have been Officer Adcock calling Anand asking if he knew where Hay was. This was the call that matched the correct tower at the right time.
Ultimately, Kathy witnesses Adnan freaking out over a call from the police. But why? There probably isn't another answer other than Adnan actually being involved in the murder. Okay, and the last and final point we want to make sure to touch up on, the Nisha call. The Nisha call is considered the smoking gun of this case, as it directly ties Adnan to his phone, which he said he was separated from at the time, as well as to Jay verifying the prosecution's story. While many people have attempted to debunk the Nisha call by stating that unanswered calls also go on the AT&T log, it's quite odd for someone to be waiting over 2 minutes for a call, which contradicts Crime Junkies and others' counterclaim to the Nisha call.
Think about it. Why would someone actually be on the phone for around 2 minutes? And is it possible to actually have a butt dial during track practice?
Right. There are just too many holes and odd things around Adnan in this case. So in conclusion, we choose to mark Adnan Syed guilty.